The lack of body fat and diminishing muscle likely made the pain worse.
In response, Shane, who during a jail call bragged about crying for the judge, said this.
I'm so sorry for how Gavin was treated.
Welcome or welcome back, and thanks for being here. I'm Cassie, and this is A Wicked World. If you haven't checked out A Wicked World on Patreon yet, and you want to have access to over 70 exclusive videos with new ones being added each month, then make sure you check that out now using the link in the description box below. The story I have for you today is about a little boy whose stepmother and father decided that he was nothing but a burden. A burden who reminded them too much of his biological mother. This is the story of Gavin Peterson. Gavin Hansen Peterson was born in Ogden, Utah on January 5th to his parents, Melanie and Shane Peterson. He was a happy, intelligent, funny, kind, and curious little boy. Gavin enjoyed science and learning about the solar system. His favorite color was blue, and he loved playing Pokemon on his Nintendo Switch. Gavin also had 2 brothers and 1 sister. Now, one of his brothers was the result of Shane's relationship after Melanie, as the couple had split up when Gavin was just a year old. Then, when the little boy was 2, in 2014, he was found wandering outside his home unsupervised. When police officers arrived and entered the house, they found marijuana in a pipe on a shelf, and Melanie was charged for it. A few months later, she pleaded guilty to allowing a child to be exposed to illegal drugs or paraphernalia, and she was then sentenced to probation. Now, Gavin's mother took her probation very seriously. She completed her community service and mental health and substance abuse programs. By mid-2015, she had a stable job and had done everything that the courts had asked of her. But regardless, the mother would never again regain legal custody of her 3 children. After they were taken from their mother, Gavin and his 2 older siblings were sent to live with their father, Shane Peterson, and his new wife, who was named Nicole Scott. Nicole did not like Shane's ex, Melanie, one bit, and she made it well known. This dislike for Shane's ex carried over into how Nicole felt about the children, too, as they were a constant reminder of his old life. The old life that he dared to have before her. Now, even though Melanie never regained custody of her children, she still did have visitations with them. Whenever it was her turn to have the kids, Gavin would run up to her very excited. But her older 2 children, Melanie and Tyler, never seemed like they wanted to see their mother. According to Melanie, her father and stepmother had manipulated her into hating her mom, and she cut off all contact with her. For the first 2 years that Gavin and his siblings lived with their father, everything seemed fine. Then in late 2018, around the time that Melanie turned 13, she said that she started to look more like her mother. This made Nicole begin to resent the teenager, and she began more frequently yelling at her and calling her awful names. Soon, things got so bad that Melanie was required to ask her stepmother for permission to do things such as shower or use the bathroom. One time, Nicole even shaved Melanie's head as punishment for the teen brushing her own hair. Melanie also began spending long hours outside as she was forced to do the yard work at her dad's house and at her great-grandmother's house, which was across the road. Melanie did pretty much every chore in the household, and it wasn't long until her stepmother Nicole began starving her too. When she was occasionally fed, she would be given bread and mustard because Nicole knew that Melanie hated mustard. Nicole even began monitoring Melanie with video surveillance cameras that were placed throughout the home. She would also lock the teenager in her room during the day. Sometimes she would even tie Melanie to the bed with zip ties.
They manipulated me into hating my mom.
Melanie Peterson says she lived in a world of isolation under the roof of her father, Shane Peterson, and stepmother, Nicole Scott.
She called me names every day.
The emotional and physical started in late 2018 when she was about 13. Meilani describes disturbing details like the time Nicole allegedly shaved her head as punishment for brushing her hair.
At that time, I was mostly focused on surviving.
But that was only the start.
They would starve me until I was really skinny.
Meilani says she was fed 1 to 2 times a day, the same food prosecutors allege her little brother Gavin ate before presumably dying of hunger.
The same thing Gavin did. Bread with mustard.
Meilani says Nicole included the mustard because the kids hated it.
I can't go there.
She also alleges being locked inside a bedroom. Nicole tracked her every move with a camera. At one point, zip-tied her to the bed.
They would tie my ankles, and she said if I moved, she'd beat me over and over again.
Meilani says Nicole beat her with a belt or a wooden spoon.
While all of this was going on, Meilani's father, Shane, would pretend he had no idea, or sometimes he would even watch on and participate in the punishments. Meilani's older brother, Tyler, was also encouraged to beat her, even though the two siblings had once been very close. At this time, Gavin wasn't being punished as severely as his sister was. Instead, she would be punished whenever her little brother did something wrong. In March of 2019, a concerned friend whom Meilani had confided in would tell a school counselor about the abuse that was going on, and child services were contacted. Soon after, a caseworker was sent out to interview Meilani. While at first the teen told her that she was fine because she was afraid that her father and stepmother would retaliate against her, she eventually told the social worker the entire truth. But even though Meilani told the caseworker that she was, quote, deathly terrified to go home, she was sent back anyways. Unreal. Instead of putting her and her siblings into a different home, one that was safer, a safety plan was instead created.
They basically told me that they couldn't do anything. I told them that I was deathly terrified to go back with them.
Instead, Meilani says a safety plan was created and Nicole wasn't allowed to be alone with her.
I remember her telling me she wanted to kill me.
Child Services decided that Meilani was to go to her great-grandmother's house, which was across the street, until Shane got home from work each day. This was somehow their solution. But tell me how that makes any sense, especially since Shane is compliant in all of the abuse. Since this plan was considered by Child Services to be a remedy, the case was closed out about a month later. From there, Nicole's mistreatment of Meilani only further escalated, because of course it did. In April of 2019, the teen who decided that she had enough ran away from home. But Shane and Nicole found her walking near a gas station shortly after. Once she got in the car with her father and stepmother, Nicole began strangling Meilani. The teen girl said that she felt like she was going to die. Then one day in May, Meilani was outside doing some yard work when she accidentally ran over the sprinkler with a lawnmower and broke it. She was terrified of what could happen if Nicole found out. At the time, her stepmother was taking a nap, but her father was home and awake. He told Meilani to get in the car, and she believed that they were going to the hardware store to purchase a replacement. But instead of doing that, Shane drove Meilani to her mother's house and dropped her off. From that day on, Meilani lived with Melanie again. Now, once Meilani told her mother what had been going on inside Shane's home, Melanie contacted the non-emergency number at the Weber County Sheriff's Office, and the case was referred to Child Services. When a detective later spoke with Meilani and Melanie, he told the mother that sometimes there was too strict of parenting like Shane, and sometimes too relaxed of parenting like her, and that he couldn't just arrest somebody for giving a bad haircut, referring to the time that Nicole had shaved Meilani's head. The DCFS worker also told the mother that there was nothing that could be done because there was no evidence. This was even though they had taken a picture of a golf ball-sized bruise on Meilani's leg that she said Nicole had given her. When Shane and Nicole were confronted with the information that Child Services had, they claimed that Meilani was unstable and couldn't be trusted, so they had to keep her under constant surveillance. They also stated that the reason why Nicole had shaved Meilani's head was because her hair smelled like urine, and they didn't want her to get made fun of at school. So you couldn't have just, washed it? Shane then said that the reason why he had brought Meilani back to her mother's house was because she was too defiant and resented him for having rules. Shane said that she would rather live with Melanie anyways. And apparently this was enough for child services at the time because nothing further was done. After Melanie had heard how her daughter was being treated by Shane and Nicole, she hired an attorney to try to get Gavin back. Her oldest son, Tyler, was already of legal age. Melanie would then regain her visitation rights with Gavin in November of 2019, and she spent time with him every other weekend. That's until late February of 2020, when Nicole found out that Melanie had taken a picture of Gavin to document the signs of malnutrition that she was noticing. After that, Melanie said that Nicole and Shane made false allegations against her to child services. They said that she was trying to break their custody agreement and manipulate Gavin against them. Melanie fought the allegations, but pending a judgment by the Utah Division of Child and Family Services, with the process being dragged out due to the pandemic, Child Services decided that in-home services were needed for both her and Shane's home. By this point, with Meilani out of the house, Nicole's focus and mistreatment shifted to Gavin. Gavin now had to do all the chores inside and outside the house, like his sister had previously been responsible for. After he had finished all his work, Nicole would give him a piece of bread with mustard on it and a third cup of water. But she didn't give him food every day, only if she felt like he earned it. Needless to say, he began losing weight at a rapid pace, and it wasn't long until his ribs were visible. In August of 2020, Child Services received a call reporting concerns of how Gavin was being treated in his father's home. However, the information did not meet the criteria required by Utah state law to open an investigation. But it was, however, relayed to the family's in-home service worker who was currently working the case. By May of 2021, the Peterson family had successfully completed their in-home services, and a judge closed the case. At school, cafeteria workers would notice that Gavin would just ask for water at lunch. Then he would stand by the trash can for the rest of the time. He would wait until everyone left the cafeteria, then go rummaging through the trash can for scraps. Gavin would eventually tell one cafeteria worker named Jan that he had been hungry for days, but didn't have any money to afford lunch. So Jan and other staff members began helping him pay for meals. However, when Nicole found out about this, she went to the school and began screaming at the workers, telling them they better not feed Gavin. Even after this, they would still continue to sneak him food, though. Not long after this incident, Gavin showed back up at school with a chipped tooth. In September of 2022, a call was made to Child Services by someone who was concerned about Gavin's well-being. But once again, a hotline worker decided that it did not meet the criteria to open up an investigation. Then in March of 2023, DCFS received another report that Gavin was being neglected, and this time they did open up an investigation. 2 days later, the agency was again alerted of the mistreatment of Gavin, and this information was added to the current case. A few days later, Gavin was interviewed by child service workers, and he would tell them that there was no mistreatment going on in the home. But then on May 8th, Child Services received yet another report saying that Gavin was being harmed inside his father's house. After that, an investigator went out to the home and interviewed Gavin and his father and stepmother separately. The case was closed out about a week later with no findings of neglect or abuse. By August, Gavin had been withdrawn from school, and it was reported that he was now being homeschooled. And for some reason, Utah has no policy put in place to monitor children who are withdrawn from school after there are allegations of abuse and neglect. While the Peterson family had pictures of all the other children in their home, there was none of Gavin. One of Shane's coworkers said that he even had a picture of his youngest son on his desk, but he had no idea that Gavin even existed. Text messages between Shane and Nicole talk about how much they hate Gavin and how they love to torture him. They also never refer to him by name, only using derogatory terms when speaking about him. Their conversations would sometimes include Gavin's older brother, Tyler, too. And the three adults would discuss if Gavin was allowed to use the restroom or if he was allowed to have food. They also spoke about hitting Gavin, including using a piñata stick to do so. In one conversation, Nicole said that she hated Gavin more and more each day. She said this after a school nurse had called to inform her that Gavin's nail bed was badly infected. Afterwards, Nicole told Shane that the little boy was just doing it for attention. Unlike his siblings' rooms, which were carpeted, Gavin's room had just bare plywood that was painted. There was also tape laid out on the floor in the shape of a box, and that was supposed to serve as Gavin's bed. He had no blankets or any bedding. Gavin was repeatedly beaten and denied food and water. And it said that he even resorted to eating his own feces in an attempt to stay alive. On July 9, 2024, officers responded to a call that Gavin had fallen in the tub and was now unresponsive. When they arrived on the scene and saw the little boy, he was barely holding on to life. He was cold and severely malnourished. On his bedroom floor around him were numerous piles of black vomit. First responders were able to get a faint pulse, and they rushed Gavin to a nearby hospital. However, he would be pronounced dead upon arrival, from what one doctor called complete organ failure. Gavin's death was determined to be from complications from sepsis, with contributing factors including pneumonia, dehydration, and untreated infections. According to Nicole, who'd been the one that called 911, her stepson had been sick for a few days before she found him unresponsive and covered in vomit on the bathroom floor. Both Nicole and Shane reported that Gavin had been sick for several days prior to his death, and he had been vomiting and suffering from seizures, but they hadn't taken him to the doctor. The other thing is that Nicole had waited close to a half an hour after finding Gavin unresponsive to call 911. An entire 21 minutes had passed between her texting Shane asking him what she should do about Gavin and her calling emergency services. When she then waited for first responders to arrive, Nicole reversed the lock that was on Gavin's door so it could now be opened from the inside. Now, Gavin's older brother Tyler had texted their father Shane after he heard that his little brother was dying. He was panicky and asked what he should do next. But not out of concern for Gavin, rather for his own self-preservation. Investigators would find surveillance footage that showed Tyler taking 3 trips to the storage shed in the backyard after 911 was called. During 2 of these trips, Tyler was carrying objects in his arms, and police would later find out that these were the home's video cameras. In much of the footage that detectives obtained, Gavin was wearing nothing but a heavily saturated diaper. You could also see that he had sores covering his back.
His smile has always made me smile.
Rachel Reynolds says 12-year-old Gavin Peterson's smile was infectious. She also says, though, she noticed Gavin changed during his time at school.
He kept out his 5th grade photo behind you. Why?
Because there was a big difference in that photo from the others. You can see that he was definitely more sad.
While Gavin attended Canesville Elementary, Reynolds worked as a student aide. She spent one-on-one time with him and says she even witnessed him attempting to eat food out of the trash.
It's haunted me since I first saw that, and it's something that I will never be able to forget.
Reynolds recalls a moment when she personally walked Gavin to the office and a call was immediately made to DCFS. She says the memory tears her apart even today.
It was in the winter, and he turns around from his seat and he just smiles at me and he says, "Miss Rachel, is this bad?" And he showed me his hands, and they were swollen. His fingers were swollen because he had obviously been picking at the skin around his fingernails, and they looked infected.
Did this look like self-harm? What did this look like to you?
To me, it looked like somebody who has a nervous tick, just picking at their fingers. Like when there's a skin tag or something, just pulling at it, and it was every single finger.
She says nothing came from the phone call to DCFS that day and feels similarly about other phone calls and reports to the agency. Reynolds says concern only grew when Gavin got pulled from school altogether.
Is he getting food from somebody? Is somebody feeding him? There were coworkers that knew kids in his neighborhood that were asking, "Have you seen him? Has anybody seen him? Did anybody see him all summer?" And from the last day of school on, nobody at the school that I know of saw him.
Some of you did try and follow up.
Yeah.
And no answers.
No. I wish that the cries for help were heard.
Nicole, Tyler, and Shane were all arrested and charged in relation to Gavin's death, and they were held without bail. In April of 2025, Nicole pleaded guilty to her charges, and she was sentenced to serve a term of 15 years to life in prison for murder, and 5 terms of 1 to 15 years in prison, 3 for aggravated CA, and 2 for obstruction of justice. She was also sentenced to a term of 0 to 5 years for endangerment of a child, and 1 year in jail for possession or use of a controlled substance. The judge ordered that the sentences run consecutively, meaning that Nicole will be in prison for at least 20 years.
That tells you
like that.
it's my turn to talk. I believe it did happen like that. He was trying to live.
As the judge described the horrific starvation and torture of 12-year-old Gavin Peterson, his stepmother, Nicole Lee Scott, tried to deny the disturbing findings from the investigation.
Gavin did pass away in my care. I should have done better by him.
The judge also described Nicole's actions as being similar to what had happened during World War II in concentration camps. In court, Gavin's older sister, Melanie, would read a statement in which she said, "My little brother meant so much to me, so learning about what happened to him really took a toll on me emotionally. I wake up every day filled with anger and sadness that Gavin can't be home with his real family." She said that Gavin was one of a kind, and he deserved the life that was taken from him. She said that she will never forgive Nicole or her father Shane, and will grieve Gavin with her family for the rest of their lives. Melanie then asked the judge to give neither her father or Nicole the chance at a normal life. Shane Peterson also pleaded guilty to his charges, and on May 6, 2025, he was sentenced to 8 years up to life in prison, which was the maximum possible punishment. Prior to sentencing him, the judge had some words for the father.
Gavin was most likely aware of the fact that there was food and that the rest of the family was eating. He also probably smelled the food they ate. It is likely this caused substantial anguish and distress. A common late-stage manifestation of starvation is the ability to overcome revulsion and eat non-food in an attempt to sustain themselves. Considering the psychological abuse Gavin endured, being isolated from children at school, outside contact with anyone, restriction to his room, constant monitoring with cameras, not being allowed to wear clothes, being forced to wear diapers, being deprived of love and medical care, all would have been profoundly impactful on his psyche. By report of the school contacts, this was an essentially normal child who was driven to a point of psychological breaking. He would have been cognizant of what was happening, understood that it was wrong, and that the adults in his life who he should have been able to rely on for all things were, in fact, his tormentors. It is without question that Gavin experienced physical pain prior to his ultimate death. His body was riddled with evidence that he was beaten more than once. The lack of body fat and diminishing muscle likely made the pain worse. And I can tell you this is part of why the state has kept their presentation short. To summarize, the physical injuries identified in Gavin, his state of malnutrition, and the subsequent history obtained support that he endured child torture in the days and weeks, if not months, leading to his death. He would have been cognizant of what was happening, how he felt, and who he should have been able to turn to for care and support. He would have been hungry to the point of being willing to risk known physical consequences in order to obtain any sustenance, to keep him alive and to overcome the innate disgust of ingesting feces. He would have felt fear and sadness and pain. Furthermore, his siblings would have sustained psychological trauma as a result of being in the same environment. As a judge, we are to sentence based on the facts. But nobody sits here devoid of emotion, empathy, human experience, or just common sense. You don't have to be a parent. You don't have to be a criminal. You don't have to be any of those things to think, oh, maybe this should be wrong. The reason I emphasize that, and it does make me emotional, because I think of, first of all, you were Gavin's dad. I don't think you deserve that title anymore, but there's nothing that can be done to change it. You certainly were not his father, and you certainly were not his protector. I don't believe for a minute that you weren't part and parcel of a significant portion of the abuse that he endured. I also find it telling that I'm more emotional about this than you are. And I think that there is reason for that. I don't think there are enough adjectives and adverbs to adequately describe how awful this situation is.
In monitored jail calls following Shane's guilty plea, he said that he had managed to, quote, push out a tear for the judge. Gavin's older brother Tyler pleaded guilty as well, but with a mental illness. He was diagnosed with autism, persistent depression, the presence of a personality disorder, and generalized anxiety. His sentencing has not yet taken place.
It broke my heart to know that he died that way. I don't know how anyone could do that to anyone.
With support from her brother, Melanie Peterson is speaking out for the first time, heartbroken over the death of her youngest child, 12-year-old Gavin Peterson.
The last time I saw him, I took a picture of him because he looked so skinny. I never would imagine that Shane would let this happen, to starve him and let him die.
On the first anniversary of Gavin's death, a small group gathered quietly near a planted tree at R. Kenneth Baldwin County Park in West Haven to remember the young boy's life. The organizers of the event are also pushing for a new bill to be put into place that would allow law enforcement to be able to get a warrant to do a welfare check on a child if that child's school reports potential abuse. When asked what she would tell Gavin if he were here today, the former aide from his school, Rachel Reynolds, replied that he's so strong, that he matters, that he is so important to everybody, and that he made an impact on everybody's life that knew him. His friends miss him, everybody at the school misses him, and we all love him. Well, thank you for listening to Gavin's story today. I can't believe that multiple people saw this young boy eating out of a trash can and slowly wasting away, yet Child Services never thought that it was necessary to remove him from his father and stepmother's home. Not to mention that his older sister had already told multiple adults that she had been abused inside the home too. It's outrageous and makes no sense. What do you think about this case? If you like true crime and you want to hear it from me, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button below. And turn on your notifications too, so you'll know when I upload a new video, which is at least 2 times every single week. Thanks for watching A Wicked World today. Until next time, take care guys. Bye. Thank you to all the patrons of A Wicked World. Now, there's even more of A Wicked World on Patreon. So check it out on patreon.com/awickedworld or use the Patreon app. You'll have access to exclusive videos each month and more. Any support truly helps to make sure the victims are never forgotten and to highlight the shortcomings of society associated with each case. Do you have a suggestion for a story you'd like to see me cover? If so, send me an email to awickedworldtruecrime@gmail.com.